sure you think your way through it a little bit.
Hello, I'm Jackie Reid and welcome to Lethal's Last Word for Round 6. There's some big games this weekend and the first clash we're going to take a look at is the Friday night encounter between Collingwood and the Saints. Lee, your key indicator for this match is the forwards at the opposite ends of the ground.
Well, you've got two beauties, haven't you, in Travis Cloke and Nick Riewoldt, and they're the top two contested marks in the competition. So really, it could simplify the game by saying who does best out of that pairing might well be who goes on and wins the game. And I reckon Collingwood might have a match-up for Riewoldt, but I don't know whether St Kilda got a match-up for Travis Cloke. He's just so big and strong.
Well, let's have a closer look at Travis Cloke. What are his strengths and what type of player are they going to be looking for to match up?
Well, the last 2 weeks, it's interesting. He played against Alex Rance, and I must admit, this is as good a game as I've seen Travis Cloke play. He jumped hard at the footy, and Rance just wasn't tall enough. Now, when he played against Essendon, he was a little bit lucky, Carlisle, because he just wasted a few chances, Cloke. But I reckon the extra roots that Carlisle had meant that when Travis tried to jump, he could outreach him. So I think that was a really critical matchup that helped Essendon win Collingwood last week.
So who at the Saints is most equipped to take on Cloke?
Well, a young player, I reckon. Rhys Stanley. He's a 22-year-old. He's only played 26 games. They've been looking for a place for him. And it's amazing, like Jake Carlisle's 200 centimetres. Jordan Roughhead, who's playing for the Bulldogs, is 200 centimetres. That's incredibly tall for a big defender. Rhys Stanley is 200 centimetres. But you can see his reach. So given that St Kilda's Sam Fisher's really not that big, they just haven't got the height. I wouldn't be surprised that young Rhys Stanley, in only his 26th game, might get the big job on Travis Cloke.
Do you think they have a plan B if Rhys Stanley doesn't pan out?
Well, the plan B is who's next. Again, they just haven't got an obvious matchup in size and shape. And Sam Fisher is such a good offensive defender. You'd like to release him rather than the big job of actually trying to match Cloke.
What about Nick Riewoldt? Who's the likely matchup for him?
Well, Collingwood got the logical matchups. Ben Reid, but probably Nathan Brown. Nathan Brown has taken Nick Riewoldt the majority of occasions and has done pretty well, to be honest. Got the size, got the strength, seems to have the running ability to stay around Nick. So on that basis, I think Nathan Brown will get the job.
Well, let's go to your key tactic now, and it's the Pies' leaky defence. Here's the stats on the Pies defending, Lee.
Bad numbers, aren't they? Really? I mean, they're just conceding a lot of scores to opposition, like an average of 106 points per game, which is the fourth most in the league. You know, when you're behind only Melbourne, GWS and Brisbane. And I guess last week, maybe their captain had his views.
Well, Scott Pendlebury alluded to that fact after Anzac Day. He said they burnt us pretty badly by playing honest football and we started cheating.
Well, it'll be a little bit unfair, but I'm going to start looking at an individual player, Steele Sidebottom. And if I was to read Scott Pendlebury's mind, I wonder whether this is the kind of thing he's talking about. You see him, he's alongside Zaharakis, but he just doesn't go with Zaharakis when the ball goes forward. Again, he's in defence here on Heppel. When the ball comes out of the Essendon forward line, Heppel's coming out with it, but Sidebottom's not going with him. We see Sidebottom against Stanton at the centre bounce there. OK, Essendon get the ball. Now you've got to get back in defence. OK, the ball goes in. It's a flowy of play. The Essendon midfielders are getting it. Who's there? Stanton. But Steele Sidebottom's not. Now, he is their midfield goal kicker, Steele Sidebottom, but I often think he bobs up in the forward 50 every now and again on his own. I think, where'd he come from? I reckon he might be the kind of player that's being a bit optimistically pushing forward. Just maybe that's what Scott Pendlebury was talking about.
Well, by coming out with that statement, do you think that Scott has put extra pressure on himself and his defensive work?
Well, yes, but that's fair enough. I mean, if you say the words, this is what we need to do, then Scott Pendlebury's got to be the first midfielder chasing back into defence. I think he does that anyway, but he's got further motivation this week.
OK, Lee, who's going to win?
Well, I'm going for Collingwood. I was thinking footy in terms of how many times if they played each other 10. Collingwood had beat St Kilda 7 out of 10. So I think this week I'm certainly going for the Magpies.
So that's Lethal's last word on the Pies versus the Saints. To the Saturday afternoon clash at Blundstone Arena in Hobart, North Melbourne is taking on the undefeated Port Adelaide. And Lee, with coach Ken Hinkley to miss the game with the virus, having a different coach, will that affect Port Adelaide at all?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, they've got a couple of games to prepare. Alan Richardson is going to be their coach. I think I was going to be the coach on. So I think I was the last coach to not be available. In 2005, unfortunately, late in the year, Mum was on her deathbed and I had to, on the Saturday morning, hand over the coaching roles to John Blakey. So most of the pre-planning was done. This is a couple of days in advance. But I think in the modern era, coaches do most of their work in that week-to-week cycle. So whether they're missing on match day, I suspect, is not a great issue at all.
So your key player for the Kangas is the man leading the Coleman medal.
Well, Lindsay Thomas, and people call him Mr. Accuracy. Isn't that amazing? Because he was just missing from everywhere last year. But yes, he's kicked 21 goals, 6 behinds. So his ability to convert has just been magnificent this year. He's having 5 shots at goal a game, and he's kicked 11 of them from set shots and a couple a game from free kicks. So if I'm Port Adelaide defender, if you're going to tackle Lindsay Thomas, be very careful you don't make high contact, because he's very good at dropping the knees into the tackle and getting a free kick. But he's been fantastic.
So who's your key player for the Power?
Well, I think we'll go for Justin Westhoff. Again, he's having a lot of shots at goal. He's kicked 13 goals, 14, but he's also had 20 disposals, 9 marks. In other words, he's not just playing forward 50. And therefore, I think if you're planning the game from the Kangaroos' point of view, he could be deep in defence, as he's taken a couple of marks there. He could be in the forward line. And he's one of the reasons I think Port Adelaide, Port Power, are undefeated. He's been good at different points of time, but this is the best 5 games he's ever played.
So who's the likely matchup for him?
Well, I would have thought not Scott Thompson, because he'll probably play on Jay Schultz, who is the genuine full forward for Power. Probably, I reckon, someone like Michael Ferrito, if he's in the forward line, or maybe Nathan Grogan. But I think you've got to be prepared to get different players on him around the field. So
take us through your key indicator for this game. What have you noticed?
Well, basically who they've been playing. I mean, Port are undefeated, but you have a look at the teams they've beaten. Melbourne, Giants, Adelaide, Gold Coast, and last week they come from a long way back, had a fantastic last quarter to beat the West Coast. But they're undefeated. Have a look at North Melbourne. They've lost to Collingwood, Geelong, Sydney and Hawthorn. They beat Brisbane easy. The 4 teams they've lost to are probably the 4 most likely premiership aspirants. So even though it's 1-4 versus 5-0, I think the Kangaroos have got better form.
OK, last word. Who's going to get the points?
Well, on that basis, I think the Kangaroos down at Hobart, they're trying to make it the fortress down there. I'm tipping the Kangaroos to get over the top of Port.
Well, let's take a look at your tips for round 6, Lee, the Pies versus the Saints.
Well, I'm going to tip Collingwood to beat St Kilda. I reckon they beat them 7 out of 10, so Collingwood there. Essendon, they beat the Giants 10 times out of 10 times. Kangaroos, I reckon it's a 6 out of 10 at the moment. Go for them. Hawthorn, I'd reckon, would beat Adelaide 8 times out of 10, even in Adelaide. Richmond, Geelong. I'm going to go for Geelong, but I like Richmond's in this week, but Geelong, about 6 out of 10, very close to that game. Now, I reckon the Suns versus the Dockers there. The Dockers,
Suns?
Well, Fife's out, Hill's out, Pavlich is out, Bradley's out. I reckon it's a 50-50 game, but I'll go for the home team, the Suns. The Swans, they're going to beat the Lions, probably 9 out of 10 in Sydney. I would have thought Carlton, I reckon they beat Melbourne 10 out of 10 if they played the next 10 weeks. And the Eagles, I reckon they're probably 8 out of 10 against the Bulldogs, so I will tip them.
So that's Lethal's last word for round 6. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.